Good morning, everyone! Before we start our event, we would like to give a few reminders. First, this event will be recorded for documentation purposes. We are now also live on Facebook. Second, please feel free to express yourselves using the reaction buttons on our live stream platforms. You are also welcome to use the chat box, which is located on the right portion of your screen. And lastly, if you have any questions, you may send in your queries in our chat box. Kindly wait for your question to be addressed. Once again, good morning, everyone. Today we will be starting the event Redesigning Schools, an approach geared towards the embracing of a new normal in education. This event is brought to you by PhilPass. My name is Paula Vasquez, and I will be your host for today. Just to note, this event will be recorded for documentation purposes, so sit back, relax, and tune in as we go through the world of new normal in education. You can also sign up for a PhilPass digital ID. Just scan the QR code that will flash on the screen later on, or type philpass.app.ph on your website browser. So before we start our event, let us watch the company's first ever commercial entitled At Ease with PhilPass.
Kaya mo to. Kaya mo to.
Mr. Martin, it is stated in your resume that you had your internship in HealthPal, which is one of our partners. How can I trust that this certificate of yours is legitimate?
Let me think. Teka, may alma mater and health pal kung saan ako nag-internship partnered with PhilPass. Meaning, lahat ng credentials ko nasa PhilPass account ko. Here's my certificate issued through PhilPass as a proof.
Oh, is that so?
All thanks to PhilPass. PhilPass is a tamper-proof system that allows authorities to send important documents to their recipients. It stores all of my credentials digitally, so I don't have to worry about losing them, especially for a slow guy like me.
Well then, give me a minute and I'll verify your credentials.
Okay, ma'am.
PhilPass is useful not only for individuals, but also for companies like us. With just a quick QR code scan, we can easily verify the credentials of our potential employees. Not just that, it also prevents fake credentials from circulating within our company. Oh, PhilPass just made our job easier. Okay, everything is verified. Thank you for today, Mr. Martin, and we're glad to...
To? Ano daw? Wrong timing naman tong brownout na to. Yes!
Visit www.philpass.ph to learn more.
It's nice to see Martin finally getting that job offer. If you ever want the same experience and a similar chance, you can also sign up for your own PhilPass digital ID just by scanning the QR code presented on the screen, or to type philpass.app.ph on your website browser. So moving on, just a quick reminder to send your questions and insights on the topic through the Q&A tab on the upper right side of your screen, so we can address them later during our Q&A session. Again, if you want to sign up for a PhilPass ID, just scan the QR code that is flashing on the screen or type philpass.app.ph on your website browser. So before we move on to our main event, let me introduce to you our speaker. Our speaker has been a business strategist during his entrepreneurial journey. Being an experienced entrepreneur for more than 18 years, he spent most of his journey focusing on the education related ventures. In late 2017, he embarked on his blockchain journey before starting Edified, a tamper proof document issuance and verification system. After this, in early 2018, with a span of 15 months from official launch, he brought Edified into 5 countries by developing a network of school and distribution partners. Today, he is the Chief Strategic Officer of Edified and PhilPass. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ryan So. Let us all give him a warm round of applause through our air meet reaction located at the bottom of your screen.
Yes, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. All right, I believe this is almost the first time for everyone that's attending such a session in AME. Now, I visited a few tables. Well, I mean, we are trying to mimic the way of how we're going to move from virtual to physical to virtual world. I believe some of you or most of us are still not comfortable, but the whole setting itself is actually, like for example, before you go for event, there is networking table outside, the event for you to actually mingle around. So this is actually the same setup. All right. So moving forward, when you have a meeting with events in AMI, don't be afraid. Take a seat around the networking table, and then talk to each other. I mean, that's typically how networking says. Sometimes it's not really about what you know, it's about who you know. And you never know when you're coming into some event itself, you might need to know someone who will actually assist you in your career, or you could be looking for something which the other party can actually offer. All right, so we would like to provide this platform for you. And so later on, don't worry, after the session, we will have networking session as well. So my session is not going to be a long session. No, we will have time for networking. And that's typically where we are looking at potential for you to take a seat, mingle around, talk to each other, and definitely, have a more fruitful session itself. I mean, all of us are just looking at the screen, and just like what you're doing now, we need some physical interaction. All right, I mean not physical, but virtual interaction with the outside world. So we hope really that this AMI event software or platform is able to bring in some form of bridging from the transition from physical into the virtual world in terms of engagement aspects of things. All right. So similar perspective wise of what we are looking now is that this is going to be the key aspects of how things going to work. Because when we talk about the ability to transform and redesign schools, this is exactly what all of us will be facing. Okay, which means no. I mean, first of all, thanks for the time for attending this session of redesigning schools and approach geared towards embracing the new normal. So I will be sharing in terms of some high level concepts in terms of how you can actually help your institutions or you, whichever role that you're in, to take back some form of pointers. One of the key things that I'll be doing here, especially in PhilPass itself, is that I'll do a little introduction of what PhilPass is all about. But today it will be very much in terms of the topic proper. Uh, Most of the school or some of the school have already adopted some of the concept here. Okay, so to be frank, you may be the key subject matters that in some of the areas itself. So what I'll be doing basically will be touching base in terms of some of the high level aspects of some of the schools embracing certain approach, some of it how it works. But in terms of dean depth itself, you'll be hearing a lot from us moving forward within the next few weeks or months, where you will have a series of topics gearing towards redesigning schools. And that's typically where we invite subject matters experts to really come in to be able to share you their knowledge, how they have implemented, and potentially the use case itself, depending on what your interest is. Because I think in terms of redesigning aspects, the scope is very wide. So we will be looking into streamlining it. So in my session itself will be a very high level perspective for us in sharing with you some of the context and concept of how we're going to embrace the new normal. So without further ado, do allow me to start and welcome me with the range of emoji, with love, share, and claps. Thank you. So let's take a look. We are really looking into engagement as a challenge. I think as a stakeholder here, when classes are online, when we are moving into a hybrid system, there's still a challenge in terms of over the past 2 years, engagement is still going to be a key aspect because the way of how we can handle conducting of lessons, engagement is a key perspective for us because getting students' attention in a new normal of learning is the key priority. Well, that surrounds a lot of other elements in terms of how things should be surrounded. But let's take a look at what traditionally we use to overcome getting student attention. That's pretty interesting. But the traditional advice, back in when I was studying, all right, I'm still studying, obviously, in a lifelong basis, but in when I was in academic perspective wise, our teachers, our lecturers, professors could be using any of these advice. But it's not about yelling. It's about what you say. It's about how you say. Wow, this probably only work in a traditional physical setting most of the time. Well, but in terms of online, well, it can be still work, but it really depends on the effectiveness that we're looking at. Your body language speak volumes, your proximity is your advantage. Well, I mean, what we are looking over here, you really can't sense my body language, isn't it? And from a proximity perspective, wise, you're probably listening or looking into the screen on the monitor and hearing my voice coming out from the speaker. So the traditional advice aspects of things probably only work better in a face-to-face environment. And then when we are looking at having a hybrid situation where on the average 50% of classes are actually conducted online, and potentially this will be continued case even moving into not just a new normal, but even when we move into a normal state, because there is going to be a lot of efficiency aspects of delivery, but there's also a lot of challenges that we're looking at. Well, some of us will be looking at when you have a physical gesture, the power of giving it a death stare, or having a dead silence in the class, probably will be able to get you the kind of attention back from the students. But is it really the case now from a deaf there? I mean, I can be looking at the camera now, but do you really get the deaf stare? Not necessary. All right. So how you project your voice safely? I think these are some even have a speaker. Well, in a virtual world perspective wise, that may not be required. You'll probably be asking, can you turn up your volume so you can hear me properly and ensuring your mic is working. So there is really a hybrid situation that we are looking at to ensure how we're going to embrace the new normal we're looking having move forward. But like I mentioned, the challenges, there's plenty. We are looking at the administrative challenges that all of you are having, coming up with different lesson plans, coming up with different way of engagement. When specifically potentially, when internet for certain sector or demographic of the students, maybe a challenging perspective wise. So there's a lot of different challenges that all of you face, which I understand. One of the key things that we're looking at is the missing elements of social interaction. So as mentioned, the anime itself is just a platform, but without an anime platform itself, where everyone is just potentially having the lack of physical interaction, they probably just go to the next better way, which will be probably Facebook or different social media websites, for interaction. So, what in terms of learning, is that something that is lacking in that perspective for us? It's one of the key challenges we're looking at. The most important thing, to be frank, is really the motivation level. When the candidate or the students is actually left alone in at home, to learn. There could be other factors, whether eventually whether it's conducive for in terms of the environment for learning and stuff like that. So this becomes one of the key challenges, in a very generic basis. I mean, the least I believe, if I'm you to pen down, what are the challenges? I believe in the chat box itself, it will be going long, 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 long list. Okay, so like I mentioned, this is just some of the key things that I've highlighted. But some of the ways that potentially you can help to engage. Let's look at it. Create an engaging lesson plan. No, I mean, end of the day, there is a lot of ways to look into creating an engaging lesson plan. From the traditional way of just having a face-to-face, or even now, virtual lessons, aspects of things, to having a project work, assessment, group work, self-learning, directed learning. So those are the key things that they typically can work on it. Of course, the other part is partners with parents. But I mentioned, different demographic perspective points will potentially have different challenges. So you might have a small percentage of parents who want to work with you, again, depending on demographic of the students. But majority of that might not prefer the engagement. It's not that might not prefer, but because of work commitment, of other commitment, that become a challenge. But on the other aspects, you have a small percentage of parents who might be able to work with you. So if you have not explored that, of course, again, as I mentioned, depends on the demographic of the school and the students itself. You have probably supporting parents that comes in, but that will be a minority. Majority of them, like for myself, my girls, so study from home. The challenge itself is that I become an IT service provider. Father, can you help me to do this? Can you? I can't access this. I can't access that. So that becomes really a challenge aspect of things. So way of engagement that is one option, but it's not a primary option. The other perspective wise we could be looking at is flexibility. I really like this photo to be frank. I'm not quite sure how many of you actually perform yoga, especially when you do not move around, right? You need to have a form of exercise per se. And I think definitely flexibility is one of the key things I'm looking at. And this is actually a change from a rigid or module-based, semester-based perspective-wise into something which potentially can be more flexible because of the new normal, the accessibility, all these are different. Because when we talk about the perspective-wise of accessibility, uh, in the normal stage itself, accessibility is just the ability to come to school. If you're able to come to school, you're able to access information, you're given a common ground to actually progress in the education level. But if in the new normal, coming to school may not be one of may not the key factors of picking up knowledge, then there are other variables that comes into play, whether like I mentioned, accessibility to the internet, mobile devices, laptops, and so on. So there's a lot of other things. So in terms of looking into engagement, then the key aspects is really flexibility. So I'm going to introduce in terms of one methodology, which I believe is not something new to some of you. All right. So methodology involved in terms of what we call blended learning. So what exactly is blended learning? Now, in a pre-COVID situation, blended learning is pretty straightforward. It means classroom learning, all right, blended online learning, and doing a hybrid kind of model. It's called blended learning. It's offline and online kind of model. But in terms of the new normal, what exactly is currently now taking place? Well, having a classroom learning now have actually also turned virtual. I mean, just like all of you. Okay, thanks again for your time to be able to attend, my sharing aspects of things. So we're really looking into how we can change the way the engagement is coming forward, because what we look at now is on a classroom. Basically, we're talking about teacher-led learning, and this can be in class and virtually. And from an online learning perspective wise, it becomes a digital learning for self-guided and assisted, so to speak, or side, so to speak, in terms of the online digital learning. So these are some of the tools that's actually out there that potentially the schools will need to embark on to embrace on the new normal to kind of redesign the school perspective one. So there's 10 key drivers now for self-assessment. Okay, let's put it this way. As I mentioned, this term is definitely not new to you. But what I want to take off is that, all right, let's just do a self-assessment in terms of the school status, in terms of how can we enhance or improve as according to the 10 driver perspective. So what's the 10 drivers now of blended learning? I think the key aspects of what we're looking at is improving the ability to personalize learning. So like I mentioned, the perspective wise in terms of self-paced learning aspects of things, digitalized learning. All right. So that's one of the key things that is able to personalize the learning perspective wise. And potential for individual progress. Now, as mentioned, these are all drivers, but of course, there need to be some form of metrics to be able to measure how well the individual is moving, whether there's even the ability to map or to grade the individual progress aspects of things. I mentioned there's potential for individual growth, but once the individual growth is established because it's a motivated learner, the key and the next thing is that how do I actually have some data metrics to be able to uh, grade or reward the students based on their self progression. So I think these are the key things that we have to look at because having a hybrid blended learning model, it really opens up a different new world and can expedite the growth process for a specific type of students which you want to be able to harness as well. So the key aspects, like I mentioned, the whole aspect is really to be able to improve the student engagement and motivation. I think a lot of other things could be potentially the shift to online tests, so to speak. All right. So, like for example, potentially changing the model of testing, of proctoring and so on so forth. So again, these are key things that typically using AI technology, whether your eye is looking at the camera or it's looking at the textbook nearby. So where you get penalized in terms of certain points and so on and so forth. So technology do enhance in terms of how things actually work within the whole learning phase, so to speak. So of course, one of the key things that definitely is required is to be more holistic. So we know that some are faster learners, some are slower learner. So there is something of key things to be able to extend the time and potentially stretch our resources per se. But on the other hand, you are also able to extend the reach of effective teachers because not all just like your finger. All right. I mean, I'm pretty sure majority of us, our fingers are not on the same height, which also means that as an individual, all of us potentially have different potential, depending on how we are placed and how we actually implement it. So potentially in terms of a blended learning perspective wise, you have to probably teachers are more tech savvy. You probably have teachers who are able to engage in a more digital format. So those are the key things which you might need to be able to allocate certain further resources in terms of how to further place teachers, professors, deans into various environment or restructuring. Let's put it this way, okay? The last 2 years basically get us thinking about these changes. Or maybe some of us have already started. But the implementing of changes is hard. Uh, so it may not happen overnight, but this is something of food for thought or readjustment in terms of how a department is being established, a subject matter is being delivered. Would I be able to have a base core common subject where everyone comes in play, and then the other subject could be based on a band model where the better students are grouped together, intermediate, all right, and then students who probably need more training or lessons and so on and so forth. So that could be another model where you we probably have to look into how to establish a band map model rather than a holistic training basis, because in a class itself, again, some students might progress better, some students might need some additional training itself. And this is again some the point five and point six itself is something which is together, but that can be also be changed in terms of how it works. But of course, again, with teacher resources is something that you can explore to make sure that we extend the kind of efficiency. All right. Of course, ability to improve working environment. Ideally, the drivers itself is really to be able to decrease the device cost itself. Student parents adoption of learning app, and I mentioned this is based on demographic. But there is a lot of if there's parents involved, there are probably higher chance in terms of them learning, but of course it potentially also at another level of pressure. Uh, and of course, I think the key things is number 10, which I totally agree, is really interest in narrowing down the digital divide. Of course, there is still a divide, but at least looking at it could be something which is shorter. So improve of student engagement. One of the framework that you might want to take back itself is this is what we call manage, lead, and support. So when it comes to manage, I mentioned when students are progressing in a different format, one of the key things or different pace, one of the key things you potentially need to look at is that how do I incentivize? How do I put some form of affirmation, all right, on that, okay, you have done well, kind of model. It's a positive affirmation kind of model. Of course, allowing the students itself to be able to lead. That means creating self-led projects. All right, what do you want to learn? Type of model. What do you think? So it's more on facilitating perspective-wise. We're looking at leading the kind of conversation, but of course, guiding them, putting in the right information and context in terms of knowledge. Because like I mentioned, most of the time once they get online, most information can be just easily be Googled, but it's really the application perspective wise that require someone more experienced to be able to guide them in the right application aspects of things. So that is also why we are looking at the support level. Same thing. You expect them to trust you to give them the right knowledge. You probably will need to give them the kind of right support when they do well, or to be able to lead certain knowledge based projects, assignment, so one of the key things I like to touch about to really drill into it is really about the ability to reward behavior, so to speak. One of the common term that we generally look at is that is another concept. It's called gamification. All right. I'm not quite sure how many of you are actually doing gamification type of model. But generally, gamification itself is some form of incentive model, so to speak. The actual definition is adding game mechanics into non-game environment. Okay, because you have to understand your the learner aspects of things basically are a younger group, and to them most of the time gaming itself is something whereas they are familiar with. They do certain things, they get rewarded, so to speak. All right, so they get incentivized gamification. So the key aspect is really the goal is to engage now of course over here will be students, okay, to continue to inspire them to collaborate, share, and interact. Okay, so this is where the creativity perspective comes in play. Your subject matter better, like I mentioned. Moving forward, we'll invite a subject matter expert in gamification, especially in education, just to give you more use cases. But what I want to do now is really start your thinking process so that you can think, oh, okay, maybe I can start to look into gamification into my studies, my subject matters, my school methodology type of model, to increase the kind of engagement and participation. So some of the key concepts that we're looking at is really about, of course, setting up a goal, setting up a learning methodology, what skills you want to be able to attain in this whole gamification framework, account achievement, challenge, reward, competition, user engagement. So those are the key things that eventually, some of the high level concept But eventually, you really have to trickle down in terms of how you actually get the reward. Like for example, best presentation amongst the team who presented a best project. Eventually, having a badge given to a group of, of the students group per se, that okay, you nominate your best leaders. So those are a decentralized incentivizing platform. So it may not be just you giving that kind of reward or gamification aspects in terms of as a lecturer, as a professor, as a dean. It can be bottom up. You can create interesting gamification concept from a ground up basis. How do you, I have 10 badges now. How do you think that, I have 10 rewards or I have 10 accreditation, within the class, or the subject or the module. Okay, how do you think that we should be rewarding this? So it may be, in fact, getting ideas from the students themselves to be able to create that kind of motivation, so that is you set a common goal, and that's typically what we're looking at in terms of future engagement. All right. So one of the key things that we definitely be looking at is the ability to get the two key concepts, which of course will be the improved ability to personalize learning and the potential for individual progress, monitoring individual progress. And that's where gamification can comes in, because you are rewarding based on the achievement, all right, rewarding based on the effort, and that's typically how you should be looking into progressing it as a whole. So in order to sum this whole thing up, one of the mechanics that you should potentially explore is actually micro credentialing. All right. So which means that instead of giving them, obviously you can talk about reward. Don't get mistaken that reward means every monetary rewards gifts. Yes, that can be done as well, but ultimately what we are also looking at is potentially skill-based, effort-based type of achievement of badges, so to speak, is what we call micro credentialing. All right. So this potentially will be able to give birth to them, collecting more badges. All right. I mean, in some of the what we call activities, aspects of things, where you potentially have what we call boy scouts, girl guides. All right. What you potentially do is that you want to collect as many badges as possible just to show off. Same aspects when come in gamification, you want to have a lot of badges now, so that it actually shows your levels being higher and so on so forth. So those are the micro credentialing aspects that we're looking at. So I'm going to share a case study that is actually done by Talis University. This is actually a Malaysia international school, where they use a micro credentialing framework at Talis University. So of course they select what kind of credential they want. They acquire the skills through online training module of learning, apply in class. They collect evidence. They reflect, write a reflective testimonial. They submit evidence. Then this is where the stakeholders will come and evaluate, and before the badges are actually is being issued, and that is when they're able to share in social media. So there's again a certain level of framework that's required for implementation, but this is where there's a motivation aspect to eventually collect as many badges as possible. Because to be frank, this is also in view of how to uh, the challenge now for any graduate is that it seems that all graduate is having the graduate out to be the same batch, a common batch. So how exactly some of the differentiating factor can come in could be the ability to show more measures, more effort, more that's being collected, so to speak, during their student journey. So that could be something that you could explore and get things done. Now the challenge over here is really about having the ability to verify these badges again. Because the badge itself is just a digital image, so to speak. But I mentioned when students are able to see this as a progression for them to potentially get faster job application, you will see that having the ability to prove this on these badges is one of the critical perspectives that you're looking at. And that is where overall what we are really looking into is ability to verify uh, the evidence, so to speak, before we are looking at issuing out the credentials. So the evidence part will definitely be a skill-based approach, but the credential issue portion will be something which need to be verifiable. And that's typically what we are looking at, potentially how PhilPass can come in. So overall, I'd like to introduce to you what PhilPass is doing. What we just mentioned in terms of is really much in terms of documentation, in terms of how you verify credentials and so on and so forth. So we definitely hope that all of you have the whole idea in terms of this could be some of the impact or methodology or framework that you can actually implement within your school. So how can Edufy actually enhance on this whole methodology per se? So I'm here to introduce to you PhilPass. We are here a tamper-proof technology ecosystem builder. So we provide an end-to-end system for issuing authority to issue out verifiable documents, creating a digital ID to manage a credential lifecycle. So over here, we are really looking into the credential lifecycle over here. Because like I mentioned, you can do a lot of of change in terms of redesigning schools, giving them evidence, aspects of things. But the key thing is that how the graduate is able to show and how the graduate is able to prove that they actually got all these credentials during their student journey. So that's typically where we are looking at. And of course, just to sum it up, how things actually comes about is because today you want to buy anything fake, you can just go to Google and don't be surprised that this will be list of suggestions by Google. Someone want to verify achievement, verify the credentials, the diplomas, the TOR, potentially still need to call or email your issuing authority. And in fact, the media have already warned the public now to revalidate documents received by third party. In fact, that means that fake cert licenses, permits can be easily purchased online and off street. Or potentially this girl give birth to one street, a famous one, all right, called Rectal. Okay, where you potentially can just go in and buy any documents that you can see over here. And that's typically how it works. All right. So because the way to verify documents is hard. And we are talking about digital badging, and as mentioned, anyone can just have a good design and change it over there and say that I have this skill set. So there must be a way to verify this. And this is already is a way to go moving forward. And what we hope to do is to make the technology easy and convenient for all our stakeholders. And eventually what we are providing is providing a tamper-proof digital wallet. Now this wallet over here is not a financial wallet, but we are looking at a document and credential wallet, okay, for storage. So we are able to empower recipients so they can share their credential easily. For verifier, it's just a click of a button or scan a QR code to get instant validation. So from here, we are bringing up a new set of what we call a digital asset, which is going to be of value. And I think that's the key thing where education level or education institution or the whole education sector is here to establish, which means that your role now is not just to have a knowledgeable, work ready, a graduate, but we are really looking into building the digital asset, the knowledge assets for your students, so that they own this asset and they can be showing this asset to the public, to their employer, to their HR headhunter accordingly. I think that's typically what we should be changing in terms of how things work. So in short, we are really here to provide a platform to help validation between the various stakeholders, schools, organization, workforce, and government agency. So this is what we are providing. We're actually having a platform, what we call a document lifecycle management system. So earlier on, I mentioned about, so we are not here to provide the methodology per se, but we are here the underlying technology that support the methodology. So like I mentioned, from the basis of even narrow down to the initial aspects of having a student card, that means just getting their account ready, to be able to receive the various digital badging kind of model. So these are the few key things that we are really looking at, to be able to work on this, so to speak. All right. So from a diploma, degree, certificates, badges, so to speak, these can be all issued through the system, so that they can eventually show it up to the public. And that's typically what we are looking at from a master's perspective as in view of providing this platform. Other than that, what we also provide is actually be able to provide internship and job portal. And if the students graduate, they have an alumni card which they are able to show that they are a graduate of this university or college or institutions. And eventually, we are looking at the alumni management system as well. So this is a full document lifecycle management, which act on top of whatever methodology that you are applying. All right, because as mentioned, the ability itself has changed. You must be able to build digital asset for your graduate or allow your students or graduates to be able to earn digital asset so that they're able to showcase them to the masses, to the public to be more job ready. So this we have a base subscription, looking at the student card, and then all the diplomas, degrees, certificates, and badges, or any other documents to be frank. It can be the letter of exam clearance if they still take physical exam. It could be narrowed down to even the best students. I mentioned so best project work. So anything that is related, you incentivize because ultimately it may seem like a badge to you, it's very simple, but it means a lot to the students because they are able to showcase. So in the past, it's only restricted to the classroom environment or potentially to the school environment. So there's no evidence for them to actually showcase outside of school. So you must be able to shine, allow the students to be able to see that, and that potentially could have be a motivation factor to uplift the whole cohort into getting these badges to do well and so on so forth. And that's typically how the workforce actually also been changing as well. So these are add-ons on a bottle perspective. What is the alumni management system? Like for example, when they graduate, they are being issued a diplomas and a TOR. So they then eventually store in a digital wallet, so to speak. So with consensus itself, we do have a system that will retain all the documents itself with consensus. And we know that every 2 years, 3 years, they look for a new job. They will come back to the system to update their profile. And of course, if they do allow, we'll be able to share this information with the school. For example, you're able to know 2 years later or 3 years later how well the alumni is doing. Are they pursuing a PhD, a master? Are they working for a certain MNC or large organization in the Philippines? So that's typically what we can offer over here. So I believe most schools now are already embarking on their own student information system or academic management system. So our system itself is API ready. So that's typically what we can assist in terms of that. So this is totally in line with our tagline of certified, verified, verified. So let me just show a bit more in terms of what the student card could potentially look like. So these are purely just digital ID, all right, digital identity card. No difference in terms of how your physical card will look, but of course, what it has now is actually a QR code, which you're able to scan, be it whether for verification purposes, type model. But where the students will also be given a digital wallet. So basically, they are able to store all these credentials, yet they are clickable. Okay, so the unique QR code is unique in that manner. That means attached to their individual, maybe their student ID type model. So there's a control sharing and data privacy. Some cards do have additional information like contact numbers or address, depending on what you put on the card. So our system do allow, let's say for example, I don't want to share what program I'm in. I want to share my name for whatever reason. So you can actually hide this and then restrict the access like 7 days, 70 days, so that after 7 days, the access to the student card is no longer there. And then within the 7 days, you think that you want to revoke, you can also revoke. So that it's a pure data privacy by design type model that we're looking at. So some of the upcoming features that we are implementing is checking in and attendance taking. So because the students have an app to store all these digital credentials, they can simply just scan and check in via QR code. Even like for example, when you're doing a webinar just like this, I could have a QR code on my left or right. Okay, just say that okay, students, okay, you're given 10 minutes just to scan, just to check in and attendance, so to speak. All right. So those are the key things that we are looking at to implement it. And of course, you can have a tag of access code. All right, this is the access code, okay, which is only valid for 5 minutes. Okay, so after 5 minutes, this access code is no longer valid, so to speak. So those are the key things that we are implementing within the next this year for the upcoming checking in and attendance taking. For physical class, how it will work, or even checking into the school, they, on a vice versa basis, if they have a mobile phone, they can scan a QR code which is pasted outside our classroom just for checking in. Or if let's say, for example, some may say that, oh, I do not have a the students might not have a mobile phone. So what they can do itself is they can print this card itself and have a reverse. So potentially have a scanner station at certain places and then scan in, so to speak. So those are the few things that can there's the flexibility in terms of implementation as we start forward. All right. So the diploma, degrees, certificate, and digital badging is pretty straightforward. So we have our clients like AMA, education system, DLSA institutions, DIPA being the first institutions that are on board. So Marina, PMMA is our model. So same perspective wise, they are digital, printable, and go through. And for now, 7% of Filipino graduates are already using our system. So, like for example, we do already have a AMA education system, FinMA education network, DLSA institutions with DIPA already on board. We have other smaller schools coming on board, so it actually adds up to about 7% of Filipino graduates receiving the documents. So you have a unique QR code, which is fully verifiable. As mentioned, there is a full control sharing perspective wise they are looking at. So at any point of time you have any questions, you can go to the Q&A portion on the right, just to key in your questions. There's a voting system as well, so later on we can actually upload whichever question. So we'll pick the Q&A over on right. Okay, just a reminder. So typically, what we are really looking into is assisting your document process timeline. Like for example, the traditional is still physical copy. You have to buy a paper, do a mail merge, do a printing, put in an envelope, wait for the recipient to come and collect. 5 manual steps. Potentially before that, you still prepare an Excel sheet. So what you do now is that totally these five things is totally removed. You just do a drag and drop into the system, and that's done. Okay, so that's typically how it works. The alumni system expansion is pretty straightforward, providing internship certificates and stuff like that. But of course, one of the key things that potentially schools might want to explore is to lengthen the internship period. All right, because if the internship period is very short, like 2 months or 3 months, this is my advice, so to speak. Because we in PhilPass we do run a traineeship program. We run a 6 month traineeship program. But of course, these interns basically are volunteers. Okay. But why? Of course, why we expect a 6 months effect is really the first 2 to 3 months is actually to train them. So that then the third month onwards is actually for them to be able to contribute. And when they are able to contribute, that's where they learn things. So I think we have successfully implemented this about since last June. I think we are seeing kind of results over here. So this again will be some redesigning perspective wise the school might want to think of how to implement it. Because if really the internship is short, the company don't really see the benefit to training the students, and that's why they potentially only do administration jobs, so to speak. When there's no when it's virtual, it's still okay. When it's face to face, they probably are the ones that making coffee. Alright, so you definitely do not want that. So one of the redesign elements that you might look into is lengthening your internship period so that the corporate aspects of things can train, and then the students can then be the ones contributing back to the company. That's food for thought, definitely. All right, so what we are also looking into for this whole internship and job alumni management module aspects of things is the data analytics as mentioned. So this is just one of the clients, OED or Alma University Online. In fact, this was 1.5 years ago. As mentioned, they are one of the first few clients that are on board. They gotten their graduate to print out their diploma on their own, and you can see there's a verifiable QR code over here. So this was an online graduation that took place October 2020. All right. So how do we actually view the whole package itself? So I'm just going to run through. So there is a base subscription model. So it's pretty straightforward based on a per year basis. All template inclusive, 3 year service agreement, any document type, volume discount is available. So basically, that's what we provide in our base subscription itself. So like I mentioned, evidence-based, we are here to provide them with a digital asset library, so the individual basically or students are able to own them and showcase them. That's typically how the thing's going to change moving forward in terms of education. You must be able to allow them to just showcase their achievement during the period of studies and not just showcasing the end result, which is the diplomas, the degrees, and the transfer record just by grades, because there's a lot of other soft skills that they might have gotten, which will prove very useful when you go for their job application. So the specialist is based subscription. What we can also provide in this whole package itself is a teacher staff card for teachers, support staff, management, and of course some of the features I mentioned, skill mapping, validation, exploration is one of the key things. I believe maybe some of you are from the registrar department or the administration or account or department. Some of you might say, oh, if I issue out diplomas, from the system, so that means that I don't have a certified true copy or reprint request, as part of my revenue stream. So what happens over here, some of my clients is that they put a validation expiration date for the diplomas and the certificate model. All right, so it means that instead of having pocket revenues, after 3 years, after 5 years, the whole cohort really requires a validation copy. One of the key things you must know that is once we issue the electronic copy, does it stop them from printing? The answer is no. Okay. But if they want to get this to be validated, then that's typically something that needs to be issued. All right. So this is the whole package from the base model. And during this service period, inclusive of any future features upgrade as well. The other aspect someone may be thinking of is that, okay, so this also sounds good for my alumni. So what we also provide will be a front where the alumni will be able to key in for the request for the diploma issuance and any type of documents. So of course, this is not inclusive of the issuance credits, which potentially goes on to the next, which is the credit-based acceptance, where we go by batch on a per 100 basis credits kind of model. This is very useful and suitable for alumni document requests. HR related document, like I mentioned, certificate of employment and other stuff that we could be looking at. We also have a new system that we are providing, which is any file verification system. Of course, all method of NFT, all right, non-fungible token. Think of that as you are able to upload videos, upload image, any documents, just to prove that you own these documents. Yes, this is how part of this any file verification system. The only thing that probably we don't do is that it's not transferable. You own a diploma, you own a certificate, you can't really transfer a skill set. Okay, so it's not really an NFT model, but of course, I'm trying to tell you is that the way of us getting all these documents is similar to MSD, but it's just called minting. All right, minting means putting documents or a digital asset on the blockchain, which is verifiable. So we started off in education expansion, but there's other use cases. Some of you may be asking, okay, how long, what other things is PhilPass doing? We're also involved in the construction sector, basically providing 7.5 million construction workers with a digital ID so that they are able to store their time to prove verifiable permit certificates. We are also in the healthcare sector, like for example, assisting test centers to issue out tamper-proof verifiable test results as well, so that we know international travel is opening up. So there's like 1.8 million outbound travelers, 8 million inbound. So definitely this will be on the road of recovery within the next 2 years itself. Okay, so typically these other things will be considered as our other use case like real estate and maritime. So just to do a quick sum up, we are here to provide the system to assist the issuing authority like yourself to lower down costs and so as mentioned earlier on, 5 manual way is totally removed. You still provide the Excel sheet and do the drag and drop. If you are API, you don't even need to prepare the Excel sheet. It's just a click, and then data point get sent over to us. We mean the document, and then we return you with the verifiable one. For recipients, everything is digitalized, much easier to store and share. And for the requester itself, no more calling or email. do we check all this information accordingly? Okay, so these are some of the key aspects of how verification is being done. Same thing, just scan a QR code, all right, get the phone, the keys, the encryption key inside, and that's typically how the verification takes place instantaneously. And typically, that's what we have been doing so far with the various people. But in a electronic form, you know that it can be still be tampered. All right, but in our system, it shows the actual copy, so to speak. All right, so that's typically what we do. From whole process, we speed up the digital transformation process and make KYC more efficient. And again, can be done in any documents or even IDs as mentioned earlier on. So just scanning a QR code and then being able to show the necessary information. Data privacy, as mentioned, I can restrict the sharing of contact numbers and address accordingly and so on and so forth. So if you have a mobile phone, you can just any QR code over on my screen, you can just scan it, and it should be working in that manner. All right. So as mentioned, we are able to track expired documents instantaneously. So any document that's expired will show expired in that basis. And of course, from a recipient, they're able to control the sharing perspective as mentioned earlier, 7 days, 70 days, and so on. Okay, so this is just another sample for real estate. All right, and of course, this is another sample for the house. Which currently now we are the only Filipino company listed on healthcert.gov.sg. It's a digital schema as created by Singapore, which is currently now accepted by 288 airlines and 30 other countries. So if any one of you is planning to travel, all right, within the year, we do work with the test centers, and we have a preferred rate, all right, which is lower than the retail rate, which eventually will help you to be able to receive the health cert as well. So to sum up, really is to help to move from manual to digitalization. So instant delivery, promote social distancing, lower down the cost of production, as you can see from here, easy tracking of expiration. And of course, if you have backlogs, some of you are going through digital transformation. So how do I actually, track all this information? How do I validate this? So we might be able to help in terms of all this information if you have the whole data set. The time is when is the right time? The time is now. It's really to improve your branding and position yourself as a forward-thinking organization. But of course, cost of production will be reduced, eventually looking into increasing the profit margin. So by adopting one system, removing 5 manual steps, plug and play system, easy integration, and as mentioned, we have data analytics. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to pen it down on the right. And of course, just to sum it up, we are from PhilPass, certified, verified, dignified, we are on PhilPass today. Thank you. All right, now over to you.
All right. Thank you so much for that very insightful session, Mr. Ryan. It's safe to say that the new normal in education has been something that we've been continuously trying to improve. So, the things we often have to strive for is what we can do to make lives of both our teachers and our students more convenient and more engaging. Moving on, I think a great majority of our attendees today have questions about the presentation. So now we may proceed with the question and answer portion. Again, send in your questions in the chat box, in the Q&A chat box located at the upper right of your screen, and wait for your questions to be addressed. If you want to send questions anonymously, just direct message our team with PhilPass tags on their name. So I'm sure that the audience is still curious about the topics that have just been discussed. With that said, we will now be opening the floor for questions. We would like to invite our speaker on our virtual stage again, Mr. Ryan Saw, for the Q&A. For our participants, please send in your queries through the Q&A tab and wait to be addressed. But while we're waiting, I actually want to ask the speaker about this question. With more and more schools opening up to have face-to-face classes, how can redesigning schools today affect the schools or universities in the long run?
Yeah. So I think, like I mentioned earlier on, while schools are opening up, they're not opening up fully to face to face. So there's still going to be a hybrid situation that we're looking at to embrace both face-to-face and of course the online virtual learning and so on so forth. So the embracing perspective wise is to really open up different methodology, different framework to be able to absorb because the ever-changing environment. Of course, during the phase where as the COVID-19 started, a lot of schools are trying to adopt in terms of changing directly to online teaching, transforming physical into online, obviously adopting new skill set, getting the students to be able to come online. So other challenges comes in, I mentioned devices, or bandwidth, or internet. Of course, that eventually is still a problem, it's still a challenge. But of course, I think the ease aspect of things is trying to move forward to get things better, so to speak. But of course, is that sufficient? The answer is no. That is where looking into increasing the engagement level and able to separate, because on average, at least 50% of the teaching is on hybrid basis or on online basis. So there need to be an introduction of new elements of methodology. That's typically just now earlier I mentioned the way to be able to gamify, the way to be able to do micro credentialing, the way to be able to um, showcase the achievement by the students is one of the ever changing aspects that's required. Because once we are able to achieve all this, the key perspective may not be just teaching the hardcore knowledge on the because information. It may be just facilitating the whole way of engaging and then seeing how they apply the knowledge into real world. So I think that change the perspective as we really look into that. I mentioned, even like the internship period would be something that need to be taken into consideration as well.
All right. Thank you for answering the question, Ryan. We actually have one of our first questions coming in from Edgardo Angeles, a teacher in Trace College. So he asks, how are you going to validate the LRN of students?
You like to elaborate LRN meaning?
Mr. Edgardo Angeles, if you can you please elaborate what the meaning of LRN? Oh,
Learning resource
so
number. All right. Of course, one of the key things that we do itself is all ID, students' ID, and so on and so forth. The key aspects really comes in from the issuing authority, meaning that in order for the documents to be issued or badges to be issued, you will tag on to two key variables. Of course, beside the credentials being earned and so on and so forth. One, of course, will be what we call the issuing address. That means you as an issuing authority will have a definite address that's set on to the issuing authority, which means any document coming out from the system will have this same unique address. The second one, of course, will be learner resource number or student ID, whichever you want to call it, which will be the student's identifier. So these are the two key aspects that will always be tagged on to any credentials or any documents that's being issued. That's where any individual or verifier is able to track back electronically, so that without calling in the school for verification. So that's typically what is happening so far within the whole ecosystem. Uh, so the accountability perspective wise is that the issuing authority must issue out the documents so that it actually matches the in your case LRN, and then the recipients will be the students, and that's where they're able to showcase to the HR or the employer, and that's typically how things actually work as a form of verification aspects of things because it's on blockchain and it's temper proof per se. And we'll not go into there's another section of what blockchain is and so on and so forth, but typically that's what we've been doing so far during the aspect. Maybe what I can do is just I'll just let me share my screen and just show you an example. All right. Okay. Okay. So over here now, once the decryption key actually comes in, all right. So this is just a sample diplomas by um, our clients, okay, FinMa Education. So you can see that this document is being issued, but on the right you have the issue address on the learner portfolio. So these are the keys that typically the blockchain keys that so will not change per se. No, so you can see that now these are the learner is the same, no, but the issue address itself is so this learner actually have the two diploma and things. All right, so that typically that's what we do. So this thing don't change, but the rest of the contract address and stuff like that will change accordingly. Okay, so that is typically how we are looking at. Okay, all right. Well, basically, if you are looking at whether it's debt or check, the schools are the one that get this number from the authority. So basically, like I mentioned, we don't control what is being displayed. We provide the templates, and then the necessary variables is then uploaded by the respective issuing authority. So we provide the platform. So we are typically the platform provider. CAT or that ad will still be the ones generating the numbers. The answer is correct, yes. But then the schools will be the one putting all this information on the respective yeah, respective form. You know? So like for example, I think it used to be 14137 now it's called SF1 and something like that. All right. So that's typically how things work. So the coordination is not through us. The coordination is still from the school. We don't change the workflow. So typically we don't change the workflow. So you can just visualize us as the last stage, the last validation process. So what we changes itself is really how documents being issued. So the processes itself, getting information from that ad or chat doesn't change, all right? So that the learner resource numbers or the S1 number is being established. So that typically don't change at all. So what changes itself is the way the document is printed or processed. That's where we come in. Hope this helps.
All right. Thank you for answering the question. We have another one coming in, which has been sent anonymously. What are the ways of sorry. What are ways to improve students' learning and engagement for public schools or schools with limited access to resources such as the internet and etc.?
Well, I think one of the key things that we could be looking at is um, even looking at it as uh, a remote learning structure. All right. Like for example, I think one of our clients are actually doing it. Okay. Meaning potentially sending physical resource to the students. And then, but we know that typically, uh, where they have difficulty getting internet, so to speak, but the learning materials should not stop to be sent over to them. So that could be something we're talking about being hybrid. All right, the hybrid of hybrid. Okay, which means really looking into remote learning space basically, or distant learning space perspective wise. So where you send materials to them. But of course, the key aspect is really the missing elements is the teachers will not be able to uh, convey the necessary information to them, but you have to find a way to really have that minimum interaction with the students per se. So I mentioned there are definitely disadvantages when internet accessibility is not there. But as mentioned, one of the key things is that the students should not stop receiving learning materials. The moment they are able to receive the learning materials, obviously other factors comes in, whether they are self-motivated learners or they are resourceful enough, or the hungry learners per se, they potentially might find ways to overcome them. But of course, I think this is overall infrastructure issues and demographic issues. Other, but of course, like I mentioned, my key philosophy aspects of things is that the students should not stop receiving learning materials online, offline. That's just another thing, but find ways to deliver that.
All right. We have another question coming in from Edgardo Angeles. When we say gamification, do you have pre-programmed games connected to a certain lesson? Are the teachers allowed to modify that game or create a game using your platform?
Okay. The gamification framework is something which we do not provide. Okay. But of course, what we are advising is that try to explore gamification methodology within the school side. Uh, we are not a gamification expert, okay, but what we can do itself is after gamification, when they get all these digital badging aspects of things, we can help to put on this onto our platform. Like I mentioned, this is a start of a series of workshops which I will get expert, like the blending learning expert, the gamification expert, to be able to give you and potentially address your questions. But definitely, gamification related to the education is already there. One of the key, again, is related to online. Could be just Kahoot, where students actually answer questions, and then again, gamification, get points, and then there's a leaderboard. It's a very simplified platform, but the level of engagement is actually very high. So that can replace the way you ask questions. If you're online, you can have a resource, also put in some questions, and then so that the students actually just log in, and it's just access code. It's very easy setup. So I think that's to be there. And there's a lot of other software that look into the gamification perspective wise as well. But I mentioned we are not the subject matter expert of gamification. But what we can do is that once the outcome of the top students leaderboard, whatever badging that comes in play, we can help to put those information onto the students' portfolio so that it is verifiable that you as a teacher actually issue out this badge, this leaderboard, these credentials to the particular students, so to speak.
All right, Ryan. Thank you for the classification. We have another question coming in from Roel Barte. What kind of projection or how do we see the future of the school system and student engagement with PhilPass?
Um, we envision ourselves to be the only to be the go-to system for credential verification and storage. And that's typically what we are looking at. To date, so far, we are close to about 200,000 Filipinos using our system. It will be growing. And of course, our key aim is really to make sure that it is at least up to 800,000 within the year itself. So we do see ourselves growing at a very constant pace, in terms of that. From a school system side of things, obviously what we want is to be able to interact with the individual school system. We're looking at maybe your student information system, your academic information system, and so on and so forth. But like I mentioned, we sit outside of this system because we hold all the individual students' credentials, and we are not just looking into the academic credential. Let's put it this way. We are already working with have a discussion with other agencies to put other documents onto our system as well. So it's a one-stop platform for document storage, and of course, that's where you're able to prove who you are, and of course, be able to share all your credentials to community. So that's typically where we are and what we are aiming to do moving forward. So if you ask me what's our projection, we are aiming to be the go-to system for document storage and sharing.
All right. Thank you, Ryan, for that. We have another question from Eva Faye Genobaten. Do you have a way of verifying learner's reference number provided by DepEd if it's not duplicated?
Okay. So, well, like I mentioned, we don't control the hardware as what is being placed into the system. But if that ad is willing for us to be able to open up their database, there is definitely then a way to look into that. That's not an issue at all. I think it's just about how we work with the various agencies for verification. Um, so that is definitely something that we are keen to explore. Like for example, as for now, we're just working with individual issue authorities like the schools to issue a document so that it's verifiable. Um, So from a duplication perspective wise, uh, that app will definitely need to be able to open up a channel for us to actually do the verification. So as for now, the trust level is very much in terms of the issuing authority. It's a decentralized basis, so to speak. So if they issue out duplicate copies, so the key thing now is really about so let me just try to get this into these questions, okay? Why will there be a duplicate copy, a duplicated number? So sorry. Potentially someone, Photoshop, take scan the documents, all right, and then replace it with their name. That's why uh, the reference number is duplicated. All right. So the issue now come back to the aspects because there's no easy way to verify the document. Like if let's say for example, I give everyone an easy way to verify this document, scanning a QR code and it get reflected. Obviously, the trust level aspect of things is that all the schools are doing their job, issuing out a unique learner reference number. So if that is the case, then the other aspect is that can I easily verify all these documents easily? Because the moment we are able to issue out verify these documents easily, then forged documents technically will not be there. Okay, so if I interpret it correctly, why would there be a duplicate? Because there's a forged document. Okay, same 1 2 3 4 5 number in two different documents, but the one document is original, one document is fake, so it's fake. All right, so that's why it's duplicated. So we provide a platform for you to be able to scan the QR code, get instant verification as well. So if the fake one is scanned and then the name reflected is different, obviously that's a different aspect. Hope I answer your question. Now, of course, the other way is for that to be able to open up that database. But I don't think if that's ideal state, but if we cascade it down, is if we're able to provide an easy way for verification document, technically the duplication will not happen. Unless it's a human error or debit error.
All right, thank you. We have a final question before we end the Q&A portion. I saw some coming from Edgardo Angeles. Sorry, I saw some codes about payment methods like PayPal. Do you provide some insights about changes in the enrollment system, and do you have plans to incorporate this in your system?
Excellent. The short answer is yes. The key thing that we're looking at now is we need to speed up the way of verifying documents now from a junior school to a senior school to the college. All these are just transfer of documents for verification here and there. It's bouncing back and forth and so on and so forth. So if I'm able to really look into having a whole chain of documents and verifiable documents of a trust level, a senior high school apply for college university itself. Uh, when the college and university receive documents issued by PhilPass, there's already a base level of genuinity. So there's no need for the administrator from the college right, to recheck the information, whether they're genuine or not, and so on. So we really cut down a whole lot of administration nightmare. So if let's say for example when the senior high school guys actually issue out the documents and the whole collation of documents, then if the college and university students really already on our platform, it could be just as simple as a one-click application process. Where all documents typically get transferred with consensus. Obviously, the click is with consensus. I agree to apply. I agree to share my documents with the college. Blah blah blah. ABC. Yes, with consensus. And that's how the application takes place almost instantaneously with the transfer of the information and documents in the senior high schools. Vice, similarly from progression basis. When college to college, all right, when it comes to transfer, same perspective. A click of a button, all the verifiable documents get transferred. And that's what we are trying to work on as well. But it needs to get somewhere. We have the ideal state. We have the ideal state in terms of how things should work. We have the ideal state. But we need different stakeholders to come into this ecosystem to understand how this thing works and to take the step forward. And this is the system that we should be embracing in so that there's a lot of reduction of unnecessary paperwork. That's pretty sweet. Hybrid working, work from home, potentially could be the way to go. Potentially, that's pretty sweet. You can, but paper is required, paper processing required. You cannot process the paper in at home. And I believe over the past 2 years, document release have been delayed. Yes, diplomas, degree, transcript, have been delayed. You can imagine AMA or university online release the documents just within 2 months or 3 months after they adopt the whole system. And students as far as Bahrain from AMA online is receiving the diploma and they're putting out their own and they can get it on the job. So we have a lot of testimonies. In fact, FinMa Education Center, our clients will actually showcase one of the graduate gotten the digitalized diploma and got used that diploma to actually apply for a job as well. So those are the key things now that we're looking at, and we really hope that the whole digitalization transformation type of model comes in play with as simple as schools adopting our documents issuance system. Because that is a snowball of a lot of administration, increase in efficiency and productivity aspects of things, and eventually fraud or fake documents will actually come down. That's why we're looking.
Thank you, Ryan. We actually have one more question coming in from our FB Live. How do you detect tampering in digitally signed documents? Coming from Jason Kibral.
Okay. First of all, you already mentioned it's digitally signed. Okay. So when it's digitally signed aspects of things, technically the trust level will be with the digital signature. Okay. So as mentioned, the issuing authority aspects of things. Okay, let me just rephrase your question. Okay. Without my system, if someone within the organization, can someone within the organization issue out a genuine document? The answer is yes. All right, I'm in the organization. I can issue out genuine document. Genuine, huh? Okay. Now with my system, will I stop that? The answer is no. So it's not a system issue. It's a company operation issue. So it's not the fault of my system. So it's really looking into how you control the document release process. Is there approval process within before the documents get released? Is there audit process that comes in play? For PhilPass, we have. All right, we have the login, we have the audit, we have the approval process. So we are able to minimize the ability to actually track tampering within the organization. I mean, not really tampering, okay? Issuing of non-genuine documents already genuine. I hope you understand where I'm coming from. So if you are talking like that, we have processes for you to audit, okay, just to make sure that you are able to check back. Because technically, digitally signed documents cannot be tampered with. So I need to encode what you're trying to say. Okay, so hopefully my encoding is what you're trying to say, meaning that can tampering happens or issuance and genuine documents within organization take place. So I mentioned my system cannot stop that. My system itself have an approval process, have an audit law, so that anyone can check back to look at who created the documents, who approved the documents, and that's the audit trail the same. But if everyone down the line agree to do the same, then it's definitely not a system fault, so to speak. But at least there's an audit trail. All right. So I answered the question in terms of that, Jason. Thank you. Thank you for watching us on Facebook.
All right. Thank you to our participants for sending in your questions, but we will now be closing the open forum. Thank you again, Mr. Ryan So, for answering the questions that will surely enlighten the participants for today. If you want to be one of our partners, feel free to contact industry.engagement@philpass.ph to know more about student deals. In addition, Visit our official website www.philpass.ph to get your free PhilPass IDs and book a demo. With PhilPass IDs, you can gain discounts from official partners of PhilPass such as Rossini Ristorante Italiano, Yum PH, Man on the Moon, and more. On that note, since we are nearing the end of this webinar, we would like to know your insights and thoughts about this event. To secure your certificates, please make sure to answer the evaluation form by clicking on the link that will be prompted in the announcements panel. You should be able to see this on the right portion of your screen. For a more convenient approach, you may also scan the QR code flashing on your screen right now. Before officially ending this event, we would also like to thank our audience for your active participation. After this, we will also be having a short networking activity, so sit tight. If you have received any messages from our community outreach executives, that means you have been officially invited to our networking session. If you can't see them, you can find them at the upper right corner of your screen labeled messages. After the session, you will be redirected to different tables in the meeting so that you can choose to join. In these tables, you can ask more questions about PhilPass and how they can help you issue your organization certificates and help you with your verification processes. Lastly, if you want to know more about PhilPass and its future events, like and follow our Facebook page, as I am sure that it will be both interesting and helpful to you as well. Once again, I am Paulo Vasquez, and this has been Redesigning Schools, an approach geared towards embracing the new normal in education. See you in our next event.
Kaya mo to. Kaya mo to.
Mr. Martin, it is stated in your resume that you had your internship in HealthPal, which is one of our partners. How can I trust that this certificate of yours is legitimate?
Let me think. Teka, may alma mater and health pal kung saan ako nag-internship partnered with PhilPass. Meaning, lahat ng credentials ko nasa PhilPass account ko. Here's my certificate issued through PhilPass as a proof.
Oh, is that so?
All thanks to PhilPass. PhilPass is a tamper-proof system that allows authorities to send important documents to their recipients. It stores all of my credentials digitally, so I don't have to worry about losing them, especially for a slow guy like me.
Well then, give me a minute and I'll verify your credentials.
Okay, ma'am.
PhilPass is useful not only for individuals, but also for companies like us. With just a quick QR code scan, we can easily verify the credentials of our potential employees. Not just that, it also prevents fake credentials from circulating within our company. Oh, PhilPass just made our job easier. Okay, everything is verified. Thank you for today, Mr. Martin, and we're glad to...
Tu? Ano daw? Wrong timing naman tong brownout na to. Yes!
Visit www.philpass.ph to learn more.